or panel 3, I'm sorry, is the to give us an update from the Montreal Police Professional Association is Mr. Leland Keane. Oh, I'm sorry, the Mounted Police Professional Association from Quebec, right? Is there no from Canada? I'm sorry, I've got some notes here. Mr. Leland Keane, member of the board, and Louis-Philippe Theriault, officer. Gentlemen, welcome. Please understand you have an opening statement. I want to make it clear we're going to keep it down to 5 minutes. It looked fairly lengthy to me, so please maybe ad lib in respect to ensuring that you get all your points across, because we're at 5 minutes. I'm going to call the members for questioning. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Leland Keane. I've been involved in the association movement for about 22 years. I've been in law enforcement for 30. I'm currently on the board of directors of the Mounted Police Professional Association. Thank you for asking me to give testimony today. We're talking about morale of the RCMP, with specific within the non-commissioned ranks. It's reached crisis levels, largely because of accountability at the managerial hierarchy level. There's an excessive reliance on the code of conduct process. There's an absence of impartial, effective, and timely recourse procedures. Generally, there's a fear of retaliation and retribution amongst non-commissioned members. That translates into a lack of support by immediate and senior managers. It's a nationwide campaign systematically to discharge members right now. There is one who've been disabled in the line of duty. This is combined with chronic understaffing, lack of transparency in the promotion process, and a desperate lack of human resources and material resources. The Enhancing the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Accountability Act was started purportedly to modernize the RCMP, the Modern RCMP Act. It granted the RCMP commissioners sweeping new powers intended to modernize the discipline and grievance and human resource management processes for members with a view to preventing and addressing and correcting performance and conduct issues in a timely manner. Basically, right now we have this is during the period of time that this has come out. 500 female sexual harassment complaints were outstanding against various alleged transgressors. The RCMP's immediate and senior managers negligently failed to address and resolve these in a timely manner or at all. Large number of these sexual harassment complaints joined a class action suit, as we all know. And not a single one of the alleged transgressors will be held accountable for his or her actions, and neither the RCMP commissioner or any of the RCMP managers who failed to take timely corrective action will be held accountable for his or her action while they receive substantial executive performance bonuses. The organization that fails to hold these people accountable and the people who made those decisions accountable has a direct effect on morale. Since no one's responsible, the blight on the RCMP is significant, and the blight on the culture of the RCMP is significant. And essentially, this won't be changing anytime soon in the non-commissioned ranks, how this is felt. Recently, and I have knowledge of the situation, a member provided a medical certificate stating he was unfit for duty to his immediate supervisor. He was absent for 2 shifts when an inspector, accompanied by a sergeant, attended his private residence and demanded to know whether the member was mentally ill and under the care of a psychiatrist. The inspector demanded to know whether the member was mentally ill because he did not appear to the inspector, who's not a qualified healthcare professional. The member explained he provided the medical certificate as his obligation. The inspector threatened to order the member to return to work under the threat of a code of conduct, and for failing to disobey that order despite the presence of a medical certificate. This was followed by my involvement and the involvement of other people, whereby I went to the professional standards unit and informed of that, as is my obligation when somebody transgresses the code of conduct, and it was simply held as a performance issue with one of the managers, and there was an apology, but nobody took any action. We've since found out that this member is being retaliated against in numerous ways, and I've since learned of another person who faced this same circumstance by the same inspector in the Mounted Police. So there's a lot of this. I can't generalize, but this sort of stuff goes on, and I know of 2 cases by the same commissioned officer. There's an excessive use of the code of conduct process. It's used to address a lot of different things. It's basically an abusive process to initiate a code of conduct for things that really should be training or performance issues. Let's see, in the recent case, the Division 2 inspectors told the staff sergeant that due to some work performance concerns, which they refused to disclose, he was being relieved of his command and reassigned as a one-man task to work a 30-old cold file. Initially, the inspector was primarily responsible for supervising the staff sergeant, told him he would provide him with further information in writing to identify the perceived work performance deficiencies. He refused to do so. 4 months later, the staff sergeant had a discussion with a colleague. He hoped to learn what concerns had led him to being relieved of his command. As a result, he was suspended from duty and subjected to a code of conduct proceeding and the imposition of a conduct measure for attempting to find out what alleged performance deficiencies had led him to be relieved of his command. To date, the grievance and appeal process has failed this staff sergeant.
You've got another minute.
Okay.
So if you just, because I'm
Okay.
sure
No,
that
absolutely,
everybody
sir.
has questions that are relevant to
Okay, sir.
your brief.
So we're looking at an absence of an impartial, effective, and timely recourse procedure. That's one of the big issues that we have right now. There's, as I said, fear of retaliation and retribution is a big problem within the non-commissioned ranks. Also, we have a promotion system that is not performance-based. It's merely based on essentially a resume and a test, which is unusual in any world. And I'll let my colleagues speak to some other issues.
Je serai bref en français aussi.
I will speak in French and be very brief. A lack of staffing is only one of the problems of shortage of resources. Daniel R. Paul, on the Fatality Inquiry Act of Alberta after the murder of 4 RCMP members, stated that carbines should be handed out to RCMP patrols. Later on, RCMP officers were given access to these weapons by the courts. On the 4th of June 2014, the RCMP had still not handed out these weapons to all patrol detachments, which led to the murder of 3 further members of the RCMP. Today, the Commissioner has still not taken the necessary measures to give access to these weapons to all RCMP members. The RCMP was then accused under the Canadian Labour Code of having failed to take adequate measures to ensure that members would receive adequate training. Do we have any time left?
I'd like to call on Senator Jaffer, and then it'll be Senator Lankin.
Thank you very much for both your presence here. Your first paragraph is what I hear a lot, especially crisis level due to appearance of lack of accountability within the managerial positions. And, you know, managers saying they don't have to follow the rules that have been set up. But the real question since the summer has been C7. What's the morale like? You know, I mean, we ourselves are waiting, and I don't imagine what it's 100 times worse for you. So, what's the morale while waiting?
To be fair and be honest, it's abysmal. Anybody I ask the same question. I'm more of a training capacity right now. I left the road about 2 years ago, but most of my career has been in uniform frontline policing. In fact, I work the same streets as the commissioner and the professional responsibility officer. I know both of them quite well. Morale is exactly that. Most probationary members are afraid to speak their mind, afraid to even talk to me because they want to pass their probation.
Just a very quick follow-up. I've been told that even if a person like you goes with the member or the non-commission, he's told by the person who's like in your position, you know, just go along because there's not much even you people can do for them at this point is to represent them.
All we can do is try. We're not certified, but there are certain things we can do. Getting people to consult us. This is new to me. It's nice to be consulted, and that's what we don't have is any consultation with the end user. So with consultation, we have that. Our association provides an unlimited legal insurance plan for members who require it. So we do that for our members. And my background's HR, so I got bored once and I went back to school and I got a specialty in HR, part of my graduate degree. So I can help people with concepts, including management and basically work collaboratively with them. And I've done that a number of times to help both management and frontline.
Senator Lankin, and then Senator McFedrin.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your appearance here today. I think a number of the things that you were speaking about are things that will hopefully move to a different place once C7 is resolved for us, and depending on what that resolution is. So there are a lot of things that we've already, as a Senate, grappled with and have taken a position on. And I also recognize that a lot of your efforts and of the former panel that was here are focused right now on organizing and signing up members, and so that's where your primary activities lay. In our questions to the Commissioner was very strong in his assertion that he is trying to lead a change of culture, and that's a big job in an organization like this. It's a huge job. We understand that. It's not going to happen overnight. But I'm interested, you talked about a sort of ongoing state of fear of retaliation and retribution, which is, clearly reflected in the concern of some people not being seen to be signing up active, engaged in the union. But it's also, people with respect to their own health and placement in positions or transfers and those sorts of things. I made reference earlier to a book by Deanna Lennox, which was exactly about that retaliation and retribution in a PTSD situation. Is anything that the Commissioner is committing himself to in terms of attempting to lead change starting to filter down? He talked about when an incident happens, that they are focused on asking, and what are you doing for the employee, and what kind of supports are being put in place? Do you see that? Do you feel that? And if you don't, are you raising these cases, even though you're not certified, to the attention of the people that were here accompanying him and to him himself?
To answer your question, they are filtering down, but case in point, I just received the training on peer-to-peer support. I do it anyway. It was nice to know the faces in the room at least, and I know I have the relationship with most of those people. But a key problem with the RCMP is and I generalize, is lack of willing to fund things. So as a peer-to-peer, if, let's say, the local detachment has a use of force incident, a dead child type incident, one of those critical incidents that we go to on a daily basis and that can affect you, a peer-to-peer will set up a briefing with a psychologist, that type of thing. So my question on the course was, okay, so when the members have to come to that, because, well, they're encouraged to come to it. They're only merely encouraged to come to it. They're not required to come to it. Because nobody will pay them to come to it. They're expected to come to it on their own time. There's no funding for something like the peer-to-peer. And if I coordinate it, I do it out of my own pocket. It's short-sighted. But there's no consultation. They don't talk to the user. Here's your program. So who did they consult with? Because it wasn't us on the ground floor.
May I do just a very quick follow-up on that? The access to funding for this, I mean, we've heard about the salary problems and other things. That seems to me a appropriation from the government. So presumably the RCMP themselves don't have the funds to do this, and it's patchwork? Or
I'm not an MBA. I took an MA in management because math scares me. But one of the things with funding is they do have funding for a lot of things. And I'm not in charge, and Commissioner Polson is, so I don't pretend to tell him how to do his job, as he would never pretend to tell me how to do mine. But if you're making executive bonuses, let's say, 10 or 20% of your annual salary, they're responding. There absolutely is.
Okay.
Senator McFedrin and then Senator Dagenet, and please be brief with your questions. Thanks.
You referenced 500 female sexual harassment complaints, and then you said, and I think I get this correctly, not a single transgressor will be held accountable. Some have been promoted.
Yes.
Could you share with us, on behalf of your association, what should be happening instead?
Well, getting back to the code of conduct and the misuse of it, if you commit an offense, you took an oath, therefore you're held accountable. The code of conduct is used now merely to punish people for what used to be used for training them. And case in point, the inspector I spoke of, who goes to people's houses and intimidates his way in the door and bullies members, was not held accountable. it was merely a performance issue, and there was an apology.
Sorry, sir, but I'm wondering if you could address my question, which was about the 500 female sexual harassment complaints.
Okay, so they should be subject to a code of conduct and criminal charges, and we're not aware of anybody that has been.
Colleagues, go to Senator Dagenet and then Senator White.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Mr. Theriault and Mr. Keane. Mr. Theriault, we've met before. You mentioned that you are from Moncton and that you're a patrol officer. Is that true? Yes. As a former patrolman, I know that sometimes we get a bit ignored by the organization, even though we're first responders. When it comes to the fight against terrorism, there's a lot of money that goes there, a lot of equipment. But for day-to-day positions in the RCMP, it can be harder to get equipment. And you mentioned the murders of RCMP officers in Moncton. You mentioned that they hadn't received the carbines. And I'd like to ask whether there's any other equipment that would help you, including patrol vehicles. I've seen cases where more than one officer has been forced to ride in the same vehicle because of a shortage. Can you tell us more about that? Well, here in Moncton, I now would say that we have enough equipment, but sadly, too often the RCMP is reactive rather than proactive. It's only in 2014, when the incident occurred, that we received better weapons. Moreover, we have outdated equipment too often. Only now are we getting our radio system upgraded. That should have been done earlier. Since we're only 2 or 3 miles away from the police station, and yet we have trouble using the radio equipment and need to use our cell phones. Not a good solution. So we need better equipment, weapons such as tasers. We are now in possession of better equipment, but it took too long. We need equipment and training for equipment. However, it can often be difficult to give officers the time they need to train in the use of this equipment because there's a shortage of officers on the ground, but we also need to train them. As a patrol officer, we can see immediately that that's putting Canadians at risk and officers at risk. And if there are not enough people working on administrative duties, that the same problem arises. If 10 or 12 people are supposed to be working on a team and there's only 6 or 8, that takes risk management. But ultimately, there are serious risks. We're taking a chance. We're hoping there won't be high-volume calls or very violent offenses. And sadly, we are increasingly seeing calls about violent offenders that are armed. And since everyone goes to react to those calls, there's no one to react to any other calls that might come in. I'd like to thank both of you.
And, please be concise with your questions, and please be concise with your responses, because we have 5 minutes left.
6 or 7
Senator
short
White.
questions. Look, I appreciate both of you being here. My comment, or my question is going to be surrounding the word militarization of policing, in particular, because I keep hearing it thrown out as if the police don't deserve to have the tools necessary to save their lives and protect the public. And we heard it here again today. And specifically related to some of the things that came out of the 2005 shooting in Alberta, whether it was ballistic vests, whether it was C8 or C7, whatever you want to call carbines, light armored vehicles, which most police agencies across the country have. And in fact, in Ontario, everyone has carbines, I think every police service. Nobody sees them. It's not like they're running around the streets carrying these things, except October 22nd, we had an attack on the Hill. So I just want to give you a chance to talk about the terminology, militarization of policing versus appropriate access to the tools you need to do your job. Thank you.
So I hear that term a lot, and usually they refer if they see I'll give an example. A rifle that is black, they say it's a military rifle. If it's brown, they're going to say it's a hunting rifle. People don't see the difference, but we got to adapt our technology and equipment to the challenges that we face. So we know that the criminals have access to more and more equipment through black market, underground market, however you like it. But we have to be able to be equipped and respond to those threats as well and protect our member. Because if we can't protect our member, we can't protect the public.
May I also add? In business school, I learned SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, and trends. As a use of force instructor since 1994, I've never seen a holistic examination of use of force policies within the RCMP. It all operates in silos. So that's something that definitely needs to be done. With a collective agreement, we would sit on that committee and do exactly that.
But if I may, we're not suggesting that the police look like the military.
No.
That's not what we...
But it's a needs analysis, sir.
Thank you,
I agree
Mr.
with you.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both of you for being here, and thank you for your candidness in terms of this discussion and it sort of matters that we're very keen on and moving forward with in terms of this committee. One of the things that I'm really disturbed by is the safety. Mr. THERIAULT, you mentioned with respect to, and my colleague Senator White also mentioned it with respect to the equipment that's needed to ensure that not only officers are protected, but also that the general public is protected as well. And we've seen, and Mike, I'm going to pose a sort of combined question with respect to morale and organizational change that's taking place within the RCMP. And then there is terrorism, and then there's terrorism financing. Where can you sort of look at how that's going to be balanced out with respect to a staff member and the previous panelist mentioned about sick time and leave and so forth? And is there I mean, I would guess that if I was an officer, I would be looking to see how I protect myself emotionally, financially and so forth. And then the other aspect of the broader terrorism piece would sort of take a back seat. Can you sort of elaborate? I'm tying it all together here,
well,
Sir, with respect to how that balances out with respect to equipment and the organizational needs at this time.
Well, I think it comes down to consultation. Nobody's ever consulted the end user. A lot of the stuff is top down from Ottawa driven. The user in Nova Scotia and the user in Chilliwack, British Columbia could need two different things. So it's about we have that ability with a collective agreement, and the people that I represent have some great knowledge on all of those subjects. Why don't we just talk to them? Why are we going to, I don't know what studies they're using, and that's another issue too. A lot of the stuff that I see that comes down, there's nothing to support it. So scientific support would be good.
Mr. Earl, comment?
Senator St. Germain?
Sorry, he was going to comment, Chair, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Mr. Theriault. Earlier on, you said there was a gap between authority engagement from the RCMP in public discourse and reality. You gave the example of the 4 officers in Alberta that unfortunately were killed. They were promised better arms since, but that has not been the case. Can you find other examples of public engagement, public commitments that have not been followed through by the authorities of the RCMP? Myself, by working in Moncton and through working with other people in the country, I noted that there were many commitments to replace vacant positions or positions where someone left on maternity leave, for example, replacing people that are under long-term illness, but these positions are very seldom filled. We're told we're going to look into it, but in the field we don't always see that there's a change. Do you have any other examples? The RCMP is a rather heavy and ponderous organization. So when we were talking about carbines, we know that other federal police bodies had the same equipment up to 10 years ago, but it took a lot of time and many studies before the equipment actually arrived. When we think of the R-plates were a long time coming also. Why did it take so long for the RCMP to get the R plates when other police bodies and federal police bodies received this equipment beforehand? Radios also in many jurisdictions like Saint-Albert and Moncton are an issue because we find it hard to communicate amongst ourselves. Our radio systems are 20 or even 30 years old.
Okay, colleagues, I want to thank our witness for appearing. We very much appreciate the time you've taken out of your schedule. I'm going to suspend for 2 minutes for our next panel. If you have anything further you want to add, please send it in to us in writing because we'll definitely peruse it if you have something else to provide us. So I'm going to suspend for 2 minutes. Thank you.